Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have Cheryl Furer, and she is a midwife, an educator, and healer dedicated to providing expectant mothers with the knowledge, care, and power to create safe, healthy, and memorable prenatal and postpartum experiences. As the owner of Experience Midwifery, online midwifery coaching, Cheryl serves as an emotional compass, supporting and mentoring professional women navigating their transition into motherhood. Through her practice and with coaching, she empowers pregnant women who want more than just generic maternity information. They want an expert who has the education and skill to understand what's happening with their bodies and the ability to give them personalized education. So let me see, you did your training in the Midwifery College of Utah in 2010, and then that 4-year journey started for you, and then you became a midwife. You also enrolled in 2008 in the Homeopathy School of International School. So welcome, and I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about your journey, and also to share with our listeners why why you became this. But how did it start for you? How did you just know this right from the get-go that you're a born midwife?
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is really a pleasure to be interviewed by you, and I'm really excited for our conversation today, so thank you. Yeah, well, it's kind of a fun journey. I knew I wanted to become a homeopath. I was working at a health food store, and whenever people came in and asked for something that I didn't know what they were saying, I was like, let's go look at those little blue bottles. Like, I did not know anything about homeopathy. And because of that, it really intrigued me, and I decided to enroll in that school formally. So I took a 2-year enrollment at the Homeopathy School International and really dived into this unique form of medicine. It's very individualized, which I love. And on that journey, I decided that it would be a very hard path to only be a homeopath. You know, a lot of people don't know what it is. There'd be a lot of educating around what it is, plus then trying to have them hire me as a clinician. And I felt like I wanted to do something in addition to it. And so I kind of let that question be open to the universe. I knew that becoming a naturopath would be a very straightforward process, but there were no naturopathic schools near me, so that it made it more complicated. I also thought, you know, hey, if I'm going to school, maybe I'll become a pediatrician or a doctor. That sounded like a potential path. But I was sitting in a study group one day, and all of a sudden, without, you know, any prompting, I got the inspiration or download or whatever, you know, feels right for you. To me, I say it was a loud voice in my head that told me I should do midwifery with homeopathy. And so when intuition comes through that clear and that loud, I do not ignore it. I had never been to a birth, and I mean, pregnant people and breastfeeding kind of intimidated me. I didn't really know much about it. I know. But I said, okay, universe, if this is what I'm supposed to do, let me do it. And, you know, I looked for schools that would work for my flexibility. And I also wanted some professionalism around that. And so a degree in midwifery really made sense for me, a bachelor's degree. And I found the Midwives College of Utah and enrolled in 2010 and started my journey into becoming a midwife. I attended my first birth in January of 2011, and they kind of invited me, like, nice. They were like, sure, you can come. But they had a professional doula with them. And the other doula was like, this was your first birth, you're a natural. And I was like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be here. I know this is my journey. And not that there weren't obstacles on the way, but it's still, it moved forward, which I felt wasn't positive. And now that I'm a practicing midwife, I mean, it just brings everything together, like everything that I love come together in midwifery. So I think it really was meant for me.
Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes the path is, it's like you don't really get it, right? It's not based on, like you had no children at the time either? No, so you haven't even gone through it yourself. That's funny, but and then it's like, this is it. You're called to do this. And then it's like, what, step by step, you just do it, and then it more and more shows itself to you as you go down that road. I guess if you had another voice that said, this is not for me, you probably would have checked out, just, it's funny how, how what our journeys really are, right? They're all so different, Some people had no clue, and then sometimes a life situation or trauma guides you to something, and sometimes it's just, that's what you're doing and you don't really know why. Okay, so now that you're doing this though, which I find fascinating, I have 3 children. They're all adults, I should say now. My youngest is 21 or 20, she's going to be 22. Hang on, she is 22. Yikes, it goes too fast. They're probably never going to listen to this and realize that their mom still doesn't remember exactly how old they are. But
I bet you remember the birth stories though.
Oh yeah, I certainly do. And yeah, and my son is 12 years older than her. And then I have a daughter in between, and they were all home birthed. So I made that decision, and I'll just tell you this story because I think we can run with this one. But my very first pregnancy, I went to several, not midwives. I actually went, the conventional route, and I had a gynecologist, and they measured my hips. Now it's hard to believe at this stage when, I'm not as tiny as I was then, but then I was like 97 pounds. I was really small framed. And oh my goodness, with the pregnancy, I did gain quite a lot, but I was still tiny frame. So they would measure my hips, and they said, there's no way on earth you can have a vaginal birth. And so I thought, I had traveled a lot. So, and this is, many years ago now, right? So, so I said, well, how do people in Asia who are quite small framed, how do they give birth? Like, don't tell me everyone's having a cesarean, right? So I was, I was in law school at the time, so I was very like, okay, I'm going to get the facts on this one. And so I went to 8 different doctors who gave me the same opinion. So it's not like I got 8 different opinions. I got the same opinion 8 times. And that's where it became really clear that we have this strange thing. We have this, this belief that is based on actually nothing, because it's not true. And so I found a midwife, and at the time I was in Montreal, and she lived literally across the road, and she had worked with First Nations, and so she had lots and lots of experience, and she said, well, it's a sacred moment, and we're made to give birth, where it's be fine. So she just said, read all these books, And I read one after another of these books of women who gave birth, and yeah, and the process of it changed them. But I felt a safety with it because it was such a innate natural thing to do. So anyway, I defied this. She was willing to defy it with me. And my first birth was only 7.5 hours long, you know, so like it wasn't necessary, you know. Anyhow, so that's kind of how I began, and then after that there was no turning back. So anyway, I'm going to pass it to you, but that I just want to share that because this is a subject very dear to my heart, and I'm really glad to see that there are more midwives and that it's not something that um, has stopped happening, you know, though I do feel that it has become very medicalized in some parts of the world. And so, yeah, so if you could just speak to that and, yeah, share some of your experiences and what you've noticed.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you, even with 8, authoritative opinions, you still went out and sought a midwife who said, no, I believe in your body. I believe in your ability to do this. And there's so much grace and empowerment in that, because that's our model, is that we believe normality first. We take slight intervention if things are getting outside of normal. So we do the, least amount of path to get back into normal, which is how my homeopathy really comes into play, is that, maybe a homeopathic remedy is just the little nudge that you need to go back into a normal state. Or, maybe there's a herb or nutrition that we can do to bring you back together, into a normal pregnancy, labor, postpartum. And so we start with that as our foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if things are going outside of there, we see if we can get it back in. And then we have other interventions we can do if we need to, if we need to move into the hospital setting and, have different pain medicines or something like that. And it's so I'm really grateful that you found somebody who trusted and believed in birth, honestly.
I mean, you know, we've been doing it for, for centuries, right? You know, and I think there was a lot of the fear of, like, mothers dying during labor, and, there is a history there. But it's when I looked into that history, it's a little bit misrepresented, I would say.
Very misrepresented.
Could you speak of that?
Well, the American Medical Association was formed 2 years after the American Homeopathic Institute was formed. So in the United States in 1844, the American Homeopathic Institute was formed, and then the American Medical Institute was formed as a direct competition towards the Homeopathy Institute. And the American Medical Institution made it a policy that you weren't allowed to be a medical doctor and a homeopath, which didn't work all that well at that time because homeopathy was very popular in the turn of the century. There were many, many homeopathic schools here. Even some still exist today, although they don't remember their history. It's funny how short time and history are. But their campaign was essentially successful. They put the nail into homeopathy around the 1920s and made it, an alternative or kind of underground thing for quite a while until it reestablished in the 70s, 60s, 70s in the United States. So other countries,
Flexner report.
Yeah, other countries, this is a whole other story. Midwifery also became a target of the American Medical Association. And so the early 1900s, they used anti-immigrant sediments, racist sediments, to start a propaganda campaign against midwives. And, this campaign took about 50 years. And in about 1950, they had pretty well eliminated most midwives out of most practices through legislation, through laws, and through the media of the public, you know, making it seem like midwives were causing all these problems, when in all actuality, midwives were serving their communities. Many Black midwives were the ones who kept midwifery alive in this country, you know, from 1619 until modern day. And honestly, you know, the American Medical Association really did target that population, which made women fearful of birth, and then they headed to the hospital. And then the hospital practices weren't all that great. They did a lot of experiments on pregnant moms and laboring people. And yeah, I mean, it's actually a really horrid history, and there's a lot of great books written about it. And so for me, my first book that I actually read was Pushed, and I'm forgetting the author's name off the top of my head, but I definitely am the type of person who likes the underdog story.
Right.
And so some people are like, I read Spiritual Midwifery first. And I'm like, no, I read like the problem of like the oppression of midwifery first. Like I wanted to know, like, why is it that only 35 states have legal laws for midwifery? Why, you know, I'm looking at my state map sitting next to me. It's, you know, we're still illegal in 15 states. Yeah. And there, so when you were asking me, you know, about the state of midwifery in the United States, there's a glass ceiling in a lot of places. And, you know, we're really trying to break those ceilings and get our full scope of care. I practice in Colorado, and we don't have our full scope of care here. We have a decent scope, but if we had our full scope, there would be other variations of normal that we could take. There would be other services that we could provide. We're not even allowed to really provide well woman care, which is crazy because the midwife scope of care is from menarche to menopause in all actuality. Yeah. Traditionally, we are the story keepers of the village, of the people. We know who was having babies with who. We remember people's grandparents. You know, we're the keepers of the societal fabric, as far as I'm concerned.
That is the truth I see, because I actually, my master's of law, that was my interest. I wanted to really know why some of these so-called alternative that were actually traditional ended up losing their place. So I looked at the Flexner report, and I looked at the campaign for public safety, right? Which is an interesting positioning. And if you do enough fear and enough misinformation, and you target it, you will have over years enough people that lose track of the history and actually disconnect from their body. And, you know, if you look at, and again, you know, money in and of itself is not the problem. It's who controls what amount of money and what for. So if suddenly you feel that the hospitals are the safe place and that you have to have everything available because it's not safe or natural to give birth, then of course all the drugs that are available there. And if wellness care is not essential, which is like an insane paradox, except if you understand that in this paradigm, of course that makes sense, right? Because if you had women believing in their bodies, taking care of their bodies, looking after their wellness, understanding everything that's happening, you know, for them, through them, and they could, you know, make simple corrections, like you said, like with homeopathy. It's brilliant, you know, during birth and in the preparation of it. It's harmless to the child. And it makes a massive difference. And so does, I don't know if you're familiar, Bowen therapy. I use that also for, I train other midwives and doulas to learn that as well, because it's simple, little adjustments, totally painless, that relaxes the pelvic floor. Or, we say that if you're giving birth, there's tightness in the jaw.
Yeah.
Well, if you open your mouth and relax, well, everything comes out much easier. And there's ways of just tweaking a little bit that just are so impactful, and really allow the woman to to give birth, which is our natural right. And it's a rite of passage as well, which is so lost. So I love that you're identifying to the history, to the beautiful history of this, and also bringing in this whole race issue. You're absolutely right. That the keepers of this were really predominantly Black women, right? It was a huge part, and removing it is also an interesting safety measure. It's like you've got to look at the politics behind this.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
very scary. So what do you see now happening with with midwifery, and what do you tell women who don't know this history, which after this podcast they will? But
Hi, this is a small commercial break, and for you to let me know that you're enjoying these conversations, please go 1, to subscribe to my podcast, number 2, write a review, because if you write a review on iTunes, more people know about this, and I can help spread the work, my work, but the work of everyone else I'm interviewing. And number 3, please sign up to my tips for your healing journey. And you can do that under www.drmanonbolliger.com/tips. Thank you.
are you doing home births now, or both?
Yeah, I have 2 different practices and 3 different ways that I work with midwifery. So I do have a home birth practice. I'm in Longmont, Colorado, and I see people locally. I also teach at the midwives college that I went to school and it's distance education with students who get their clinical experience with local preceptors. So that also is a really beautiful way that I can support midwives who are joining the force of midwifery and the wave of midwifery, if you will. And so I'm the director of student services there. And then the third way, I love it. The third way that I support midwifery is I offer online coaching. So because of the history and because I understand women that would want to choose a hospital birth, and I don't want to pass judgment on them. I don't want to, I understand that history. Had I had babies before I started learning it, I probably would have gone that same route, because we don't know, we're not taught in our society. We don't see it. Many of my clients, this is their first time seeing a natural birth or any birth. They've never been around their friends who have been breastfeeding or what have you. So the third way that I'm supporting midwifery is that I'm offering online midwifery coaching for women who are having hospital births. And this way of holding that space is I have a structured program where we go through several weeks together in a small group. So small group prenatal care. I don't know if you've experienced that with any of your children, but
I think it was available by the third one.
Okay.
So I did go through that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to gather in a group of people that are also having babies at the same time you are. And, somebody will ask a question that maybe you didn't even know that you might be interested in, and it's a great way of exchanging information. And so this particular program has 6 weeks prenatally, and then that same group gets individual consultations with the midwives. And then postpartum, we follow up, because this is the part I think that a lot of birth workers, so I'm talking about doulas, midwives, childbirth educators, we all like focus in on the pregnancy, which is a awesome, like we should be. This is a time, like you said, a rite of passage. But then postpartum, the medical model is very, very poor in the postpartum period. Midwives do better. And yet, where are our support groups? We have lactation groups, we have ways of gathering, but this program this curriculum that I have includes time in the postpartum for the small group to come back together. And the thing that I really love about it, I was speaking to one of my mentor midwives recently, and she was like, oh, I used to do things like that. And those people their kids are grown, and now their kids are like getting married, like these friendships and relationships can last the rest of your life, I don't know, I'm really excited to offer it in an online setting. And because I have so much experience with cultivating culture online, through the college that I went to school and work at, and also just being a midwife, like being able to hold that space for people. I'm like really, really excited about that. And that's a new venture that I started this year, not because of the recent events with stay-at-home orders, but in spite of it, actually. I had already been planning this,
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, the advantage of the piece that is online too is it actually can reach even more people, right? Because it's education, right? ultimately re-educating what most women don't know anymore and don't trust anymore. I'm seeing, in so many of the patients that, I mean, of course they got converted, but I've had 30 years in my practice as a naturopathic physician, and they come because they realize that they don't want to be on all kinds of menstrual painkillers, and they understand the side effects of all these drugs if they're on it forever. And then they wonder about fertility, and they have fertility issues, and it goes on and on and on, and they're not putting all the pieces together, that you can't go playing drug parties with parts of your hormones and your body and then expect to have natural anything, because you're already, your body's programmed to be reactive to whatever medication. So you come out and then your baby wants to breastfeed. Well, now you've actually taken somewhat questionable things, even if it's okay or approved. It goes into the breast milk, right? And then your young baby has all this stuff in them, right? And then it's, oh, well, then I won't breastfeed. And then you lose all the immunity that that we're here to transfer naturally, and let alone the vaginal passage, which has all the flora that the baby receives, because it really doesn't have its own immune system till 6 months. So that is how you're going to get it, plus the colostrum and everything from the milk. So it's like we're missing out on understanding how our natural immunity is actually built, and then we're in a panic society now going, oh, there's a virus that's attacking, and it's like, well, hello, what about our immunity? What about what we're naturally able to do and tweak? Like you say, it's simple things. I mean, like, vitamin D was finally, after, I don't know, 600 studies, I think it's almost made the news, and it's like, yeah, that could be a small element, maybe getting sun, like, go figure. And the thing is, it's simple things that often make the biggest difference.
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't, yeah, it's not cool because it doesn't make money. You know, it's not, it can't be, what's the right word? Oh, I'm looking for the word. You know, when it's owned by, patented, that's the English word. You know, if it's not patented, then it's like, well, you know, it's not really worth it. And I think we've moved so much into a medical model that isn't serving the individual needs. You know, it's like it's all about disease management, and it's all about,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when our system's broke, and then yeah. So I see midwifery for me as like a complete opening. There's a chance there because that's when women can wake up, you know, and go, wait a minute here, what am I going to eat? You know, what am I going to put in my body? And then, you know, questions like when or what regiment, and, you know, whether when one vaccinates or whatever. Like, I don't want to get into that whole issue because it's so hot right now. but the thing is, you know, if the baby doesn't have an immune system till 6 months, I would question it. I would look at what's happening in other parts of the world. You know, the USA has the highest ever vaccination rate compared to, you know, anywhere else. So if it's based on science alone, then why isn't there some consensus, you know? So I just like, for me, it's like, this is the time to openly question all things. And we're bringing, you know, life to this planet. So, and look at the state of the planet right now, you know, it's like, let's wake up, you know. So anyhow, enough about all this. I want you to share a little bit more too. Like, I guess one of the things that a lot of my patients were saying is like, oh, well, I just can't deal with the pain.
Mm.
What do you, how do you address that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this answer actually speaks to both of the things you were just speaking about. So, you know, the decisions around vaccinations, the decisions around food, like everything, there's a level of trust that gets built during pregnancy or gets broken down. And I think that that is also part of this part of pain management that you're speaking to, is when you have people around you that are loving you and supporting you and helping you through this process of bringing your baby into the world, and you trust this person. You know, I see my clients at all of their prenatals for over an hour, about 45 minutes to an hour for each of their prenatal visits. I can do their vitals in 5 minutes. I don't need the whole hour to take a set of vitals. But what happens is that we talk, and they learn about me, I learn about them, and we build trust. And when you're surrounded by all of that trust and love in your birthing process, I believe that they can do it. And I believe that if we need other interventions, they're available. We'll come to that bridge if we need to cross it. That's okay. And you're surrounded by trust and love. And so when it gets hard, we're here for you. I'm going to help you, right? Like, I'm going to help you take a breath. I'm going to help you manage it. And one great quote is, I can do anything for a minute. And natural contractions have a rhythm to them. If you've ever seen pictures of, you know, someone who's giving birth and they're almost falling asleep, you know, we create this environment where if somebody could sleep the 3 minutes between and 1 minute of the contraction, 3 minutes between, we're gonna make it. You know, their body is gonna work and, you know, release their baby into this world. And they can howl, they can, you know, work on that because it's an intense moment of time. And we're there to, like, again, surround them with the trust and love that helps them navigate this journey that they're on. So, yeah, it's a really empowering experience, honestly. And that's why we do it.
You know, actually, it's interesting. When you were sharing that, I was thinking, yeah, it is intervals, right? It's almost like right now I'm on a self-imposed, what is that called? You know, when you do exercise, high intensity and then relax. There's a word for that. I just don't remember.
High intensity interval training.
Interval training, exactly. And I was thinking, wow, I've got to get through that, you know, because it isn't easy to get into the mindset of that. But you know, there are the breaks, and then you do recover, and then you know that it will end. It's not going to go on forever. It's an acute stressor to your body with a goal. So the goal is always what keeps me going. It's like, okay, you know, I need decent muscle mass. And I've been working a lot on my computer, much more than ever. And it's, you know, and because I'm creative and I'm creating things and I'm, you know, I'm loving the podcasts but that's all sitting. It's hard to walk around, you know, doing interviews. So it's like, okay, well, I have got to take this part seriously. And I just made the connection. It's like there's an absolute feel good moment when it's done. And then all it is all you've done really is like tear your muscles and they're going to regenerate. But when you do this for birth, you got a baby at the end. You know, it's like, I mean, the prize is so massive that it's, if you can look at it, it's a stint. And the more you relax in that, the easier the birth is, you know. So I think, and the more you understand the process, and that's what I find, you know, education and understanding is so crucial to the trust and letting go. It's like ultimately, sure, it's about trusting you, the relationship there, but it's trusting themselves, you know, and trusting that, okay, you know. So as I went with my births, I think the second one was 3.5 hours and the last one was an hour. And it's like, okay, wow, and like it's almost not long enough, you know. It's like, oh, where was my transition, you know. But the thing is, when you learn to deal with you know, pain, and you see it differently, I think you have a different experience of it. And now we know that, we understand the science of pain. It actually, there's no pain molecules per se. It's really your ability to stay in that relaxed state, you know, to bring in that parasympathetic mode in between the intense sympathetic pushes. You know, it's necessary, and that's how we're made. We're beautifully made, right? Gosh, anyway, so well, that makes me so happy to relive a little bit of all of this through you. So what thoughts would you like to close with, and just let the audience, I mean, either women or men who might want to become midwives, or women and couples on the kind of edge of like, should I call a midwife or not? Because my audience is kind of both. What would you say to either group or both groups?
Sure. So those that are interested in midwifery, I would definitely look into getting into birth work and seeing how it fits for you. Being on call is a particular lifestyle that doesn't work for everyone, and that's okay, because there's so many beautiful ways that if you have a passion for supporting pregnant people, there's so many ways you can do that. And it can be through art, it can be through, you know, lactation, it can be through childbirth education. Like there's just so many different ways that, you know, for any gender, for people to be involved in. So I would say, you know, get involved and kind of see, you know, I know that a lot of people look at midwifery as like the ultimate thing to do. And I have to refer out to people, you know, I think that my care is awesome. And sometimes people want more childbirth education. So I look for those amazing people who are passionate about that to send my clients to, you know. And so there's many, many ways to support this rebuilding of trust in our processes. And then those that are looking for midwifery or even just considering it in any way, I would definitely suggest like what you did, where you went and interviewed at least someone. I usually suggest interviewing like 3 midwives if you're pregnant, and just period, if you're pregnant, just to get to know people and see, you know, maybe you have your awesome gynecologist, you've loved their services. I have a nurse practitioner that I absolutely love getting my GYN from. And yet she would not be the right person for me to give birth with. You know, there's a level of intimacy there that I can share with you one of my favorite tips if you'd like to hear it. So often when I'm having conversations about who to invite to the birth, and so this includes your midwife, but sometimes people think, well, my parents or siblings, you know, what do we do? Think about people or that person, and if you could have an orgasm in front of them. So with your midwifery relationship, that trust develops over time, and you will know if that midwife isn't the right one for you. We all have different personalities, and if you go to the interview and that person does not match with your personality, don't hire them. Go to another person, interview them, see how they match. Trust your gut, trust your instincts. And so if you're trying to decide whether to invite your mother, your mother-in-law, think about it. Could I have an orgasm in front of them? And if the answer is no, then I would probably say, let them, you know, if you have other kids, watch the kids. Birth photography is always a great job for family members to take pictures. Although if you want to hire a professional one, that's cool too. And if you're absolutely planning a hospital birth, then seek out online midwifery coaching, like what I'm offering. You know, seek out some ways of allowing birth workers into your life. So maybe hiring a doula to support you and advocate for you with your plans at the hospital. And so those are my tips for, you know, rebuilding that trust in ourselves and supporting a birthing process. And like I said, I honor all those choices. You know, I get it why people want to have hospital births. It's programmed into us. This is what society teaches us the whole time. And it's hard to like go against that. So I understand that. That's okay. There's still people around you that will like love you and hold that space for your birthing process, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's up to us, whatever experience we choose, what we make of it and what we make it mean. But I do think it's good to have at least, you know, a doula or a health advocate by your side, you know, to really represent what you want.
Yeah, and if you have a partner too, the doula supports the whole group, you know, like,
exactly.
You know, your partner is usually not a birth expert, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, they need breaks too. So the doula can really bring in that hands-on support during the process.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And postpartum doulas are awesome.
Oh yeah, I think it's the whole, having a team that supports you. I think that's the key, and feeling supported and looking for that support, you know, not thinking, oh, you're going to just be able to brave it on your own. You might. It was certainly done before, but it's just great. It's available now. So that's awesome. All right. Well,
really, can I just say one thing? That's a really important point that you touched on, is to don't feel like, or don't feel like you have to, or you need to brave it on your own. because that, I think that piece is the part that sort of breaks us the most, is this like ultimate independence. I'm going to do it by myself. Like, it's actually, birth was never meant to be like that. It's a process that community is meant to be involved in. So build your support team and build your family.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanon.bolliger.com.